Thanks for tuning in to Reclamation Time Live for news and views on reclamation and reuse. You can join in with a smartphone on X Spaces Live on the second Tuesday every month at 4 p.m. UK time. And this is recorded, downloaded, edited, and then uploaded as a podcast to Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, and other platforms. Thanks once again to our advertisers, Weller's Auctions, who this month feature a clearance of 1,000 lots on Friday the 28th of June of architectural salvage, reclaimed building material, antiques and machinery at Ashford Antique Centre near Slough. Click the banner on the SalvaWeb homepage to view and bid. Or more can be seen of this on the notes field accompanying this podcast. This month I'm joined by Brian Murphy from Leicestershire of the Green Building Encyclopedia and Brad Guy later from the USA. Somebody I've known for a long time and who has been a professor, university professor, specialising in reclamation and reuse of reclaimed building material, and he also has run the what is now called Build Reuse, and used to be called the Used Building Materials Association in the USA. Hi Brian.
Hi Thornton, how are you doing? Good to see you again. And nice to do this face to face rather than all the technology problems we've had in the last few.
So this is Reclamation Time Live, as per usual on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Second Tuesday of the month, 4 o'clock. And here we are at 26 Store Street in what is called the Building Centre. And has been the building in London, and has been the building centre
since 1931.
And is that right?
Yeah, there's a logo somewhere around here with the 1931 on it.
I've noticed the logos all over the place, which looks like an upside down Freemasonry symbol.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? A little bit of this.
But obviously nothing to do with Freemasons at all.
Yeah.
And in this austere place, we've just been looking at Retrofit 24.
Yes.
And we've come to see what it says about regeneration. Regeneration is now the buzzword.
Yeah.
For most things. Most people are talking about buildings being, or rather building being regenerative building,
yeah.
Regenerative architecture.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to sort of delve into that a bit.
Yeah, some time ago I was asked, I don't know what the situation was, but I was asked, what do you think about regenerative architecture in urban areas? And I struggled to think of anything that sounded vaguely like get the right word here, the whole regenerative principle. And I struggled because most things, like renewable energy, that's not regenerative in my view. And I worked out that, well, maybe some plant-based thermal insulation materials might fit into that category.
Like mycelium.
Yeah, mycelium and all of the, natural plant fibres. And then I thought, well, actually, there's two potential things for regenerative. One is cleaning up the land using bioremediation.
Yes.
And the other one was cleaning up the land which you're growing plant-based materials in.
But bioremediation says what it is. You're using some sort of biotic method of decontaminating, at some sort of chemical hazard.
Yeah.
And that's a good term. You knew what that was the first time you heard it.
Yes.
Somebody talking about contaminated soil. Oh yeah, we've got a bioremediation method of dealing with that, and you know what it's going to do.
Yeah.
Regenerative is now another buzzword, like sustainable. Remember how sustainable came in? Everything was sustainable once the word came in, and it was used to describe anything to do with building, or particularly when you went to a building exhibition or conference, sustainable was always in there.
Yeah.
So everybody did exactly what they did before the word came out, and then just added it into their
and all of their reports to their clients and all of the kind of end of year reports about the business, they all did the same kind of thing.
My recollection is the word came from Willy Brandt's. He produced a seminal, I can't remember what it was called now, but he used the word sustainable, meaning that something can't be sustainable unless it uses today things which don't compromise tomorrow.
Yes.
That was his, sort of loosely speaking, that was his definition of sustainable. Yeah. So, is that the new platitude which has taken over from sustainable? And in his opinion, it is.
Yeah.
It's not a word that means anything. In reality, it's just a word that you can just tack on, but it doesn't get in the way of the English language.
Yeah, and in between times, everyone was jumping on circular economy.
Well, yes.
And you know, we go through phases. You know, when RAP were about, Waste Resource Action Programme, it was all about recycled content.
Well, isn't circular economy, isn't that a complete fiction? Because it's actually, all it is an extended linear economy. In other words, the circular part, if you're lucky, might involve some recycling at the end of life, as they call it, or end of use, as I call it. Recycling or downcycling into something relatively useless. But it's not actually taking something and going around in a loop and reusing it for the purpose for which it was originally invented.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so few materials get used in that way. I mean, you can imagine bricks. Bricks get reused as bricks.
Yes. Of the 1 billion and 3 billion bricks a year which are demolished, probably, you know, I should think a maximum of 5% are reused, that could be reused.
Yeah. And the rest goes to hardcore or landfill, I suppose.
Crushed, yeah. So, coming back to regenerative, the retrofitting exhibition we've just had a look at had the reuse of the word several times, and in fact there was even a book, and I'll just tell you, it says, the book is called Architectural Regeneration, and it's one of the things in this exhibition. It says, at a time when regeneration policy, whatever that means, has shifted to the recognition that heritage matters, whatever that means, and that's in single quotes, and that the historic environment and creative industries are a vital driver of regeneration, whatever that means, an increasing workload of architectural practices concerns the refurbishment, adaptive reuse, or extension of existing buildings. Architectural regeneration, which we define as the collective activities of reusing, adapting, and evolving existing buildings within an urban or rural context in ways that recognise the impacts these decisions and interventions have on the regeneration of a place, and that are underpinned by the principles of environmental, social, and cultural sustainability, has clearly claimed its place as a fertile and productive means to respond to the need for heritage management and sustainable built environments in a dynamic and creative way. Well, okay, so that's their definition. Now, there it is there.
Who wrote this?
It's written by two former students of Oxford Brookes University.
Okay. All right.
So, just coming back to the word regeneration, before we go on to this way in which it's used. When I first heard that word, I think it was probably at school, and it was probably to do with starfish, which when they lose a limb, they regenerate a new limb.
Yeah.
Or lizards, which when they lose their tail, will regenerate a new tail.
Yes.
I think they're the only two animals that can regenerate a part of their
human skin.
The human skin. Is that a regeneration or is that a renewal?
Not sure. And liver, apparently.
You do regenerate your skin, don't you? Because your fingerprints. Do your fingerprints?
Yeah, they do. They come back. Yeah.
So it's a regeneration. You're right.
Yeah.
So that you could say that would be then if you injure yourself, if you cut yourself, that you regenerate, but the scar tissue is something outside of the regeneration.
Yeah, that would probably not.
That's a failure of regeneration.
Yes, because that's far too.
But I looked up on the okay, so that's my recollection of the use of the word. Is that a concept of replacing something that was already there, but doing it in a natural way. I looked up the word regeneration on the etymological dictionary, and it goes back to France. It's a French word, and it's the adjective, or is it a noun? Regenerative, which is regenerative with an F. It basically means the ability of plants and animals to renew themselves in some way or another.
Yeah.
They didn't know how in those days, but they knew something along those lines happened. So it seems to me that doesn't apply to buildings.
No.
They're not. That's not what they're talking about with buildings. There's certainly a case in social regeneration. You can take a place which is run down and you can re-enliven it by getting businesses in and getting sort of take an area that's an urban area which is in need of an uplift. It's like the levelling up idea.
Mm.
And you can actually do that. The concept of regeneration, it seems to mean something to architects, but not. It doesn't seem to be compatible with reclamation and reuse. And in fact, having just been there on that
around the exhibition, there's so little,
precious little that you could.
Apart from the buildings themselves,
adaptive reuse is definitely a part of it.
Yeah.
And you could see that it looked as though there might have been examples of things being reclaimed and reused within those buildings, but that didn't seem to feature as part of the architectural regeneration.
No.
That was just another thing which they did, which was very...
Unfortunately, I mean, like a building study in a journal, particularly in things like Passive House Plus, they go into a lot of detail about all the consultants, all the suppliers of materials, and the products as well as the performance of the building. And that level of detail is necessary. This exhibition does have a little bit of that, but not nearly enough for you to discover what it's made of, except there are one or two panels where their manufacturers have got a side panel showing a particular building technology or material adjacent to a project panel.
And the two plinths made of what looks like reclaimed urethane foam.
Yes, it's a new piece of polyurethane foam adjacent to a reclaimed piece.
Do you reckon that's what it is? It doesn't actually say what it is.
No, it doesn't.
So there are two plinths which might be, and I've seen this done before in other places where they've reused materials to make the plinths of an exhibit, but not the exhibit itself.
Yeah, and sadly, I mean, I did have a quick look through one of the other books, which was the XCO2 or something, I think is the name of the consultancy. And it's describing thermal insulation materials for retrofit. And it goes into an enormous amount of detail of the chemistry of the ozone depleting plastics. And in my view, plastics and historic buildings do not belong together. So it seems a very odd thing to be describing the plastic performance. I mean, there are some situations like in ground floor construction where waterproof properties are essential. And so polystyrene is one of those materials that does that job very well. And foam, cellular glass, but it has to be waterproof to make it safe from frost damage and other things. But on the whole, plastic insulation doesn't belong in a historic building. So it seemed a very odd thing for them to go into so much detail about, the properties, the ozone depletion properties of those kinds of chemistries. But there are one or two displays which actually have some bio-based and mineral-based thermal insulation materials. So there are one or two examples of appropriate thermal insulation materials. But on the whole, most of those case studies, they say insulation, they tell you the K value, but they don't tell you what the material is. So there's and I noticed on the there's a board where people have got little postcards where you handwrite notes about the exhibition, and there are one or two of them who are saying, but are these thermal insulation materials biodegradable and carbon neutral? Now those aren't necessarily properties that you need in certain situations. Biodegradable is not a property that you want in a building that's got to last 60 years. So there needs to be some education there about material and upgrade. Oh, and talking about terms and terminology, retrofit was the thing which irritated the hell out of me when it first arrived, because I was used to refurbishment and repair and reclaim and reuse, but retrofit, I just hated it, because I just regarded it as the kind of eco-bling solution, is the fitting of renewable energy technology instead of fixing the building. But, people, and eventually you have to adopt it.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? I've spent a good 40 years trying to explain the difference between reclaiming something for reuse and recycling. Because in the old days, recycling, in fact, if you're in Australia, a reclaimed brick is a recycled brick. Whereas in this country, it's a brick that's been crushed and is used as some sort of cover on a landfill site, or building up site levels, or on a building site. But so we and all of the businesses, or a lot of the businesses who are who actually actively stockholding reclaimed material, call it reclaimed bricks, reclaimed stone, reclaimed timber, whatever, or lumber if you're in the US. But the modern idiom of reclaimers and reusers, the professional, the ones that haven't ever done reclamation and reuse, have tried to adopt a new terminology, and they've called it other things like recovery. And of course, recovery of something is, to me, is you recover something which has been in decline, or you put somebody into the recovery position if they're about to die.
Yeah.
Well, reclaiming materials is a much more positive way of describing the
very precise
move from taking materials from one use and selling them to somebody for another reuse. It doesn't have to be sold; it could be given. But
well, the waste hierarchy always has recovery as recovery of nutrients or recovery of energy, and so you're biodegrading, composting, getting energy out of bio-based waste, or burning and recovering heat and using it.
that's true. And in the Waste Framework Directive, set up by the EU in 2008, instead of using the four things, which is reclaim, reuse, and energy from waste, and then landfill, they call it prepare for reuse, and then reuse. So preparing for use is reclaiming something. That is,
Yes.
But they refuse to use it. And one of the reasons is it's a bit like we're in this hallowed building here, which is full of new product. And you get the feeling that the reason why reclaimed building material was not mentioned in this exhibition is because it eats into to the level of 2% of the market of construction sector is reclaimed material. But they're in denial over it being any larger amount, and they're going to do what they can to make sure the concept of reclaiming and reusing building material, is not considered to be part of mainstream construction.
True. Yeah. Recently, there was publication from Europe on digital product passports, DPPs, and the ambition there is to publicise all of the properties of materials or products in the market, and they would build this database which manufacturers would populate, so that then there was easy access to information. But what that's doing is moving when product passports were originally invented, publicised in Europe, it gave me the impression that it was all about reclaimed materials from existing construction, coming back into the market with credible information about those materials and their properties, so that you could apply them competently into new construction, or extending or altering existing construction. But it seems, having spoken to some of the consultants who are in the world of product passports, they're driving a product passport into new build construction. So whereas you've got a specification clause for new build materials, a product passport or a materials passport, in its, after the Bambi project, became 600 pieces of information, whereas a new build contract specification might have 10 lines in a specification clause, but you have to have 600 bits of information for it to be available to the market, which is, I said it might be inevitable, but in fact it's almost impractical, because everyone complains about there isn't enough time to do the job of a new build, but now you're being asked to put 600 bits of information out there into the public domain in order for that material to be in the building for 60 years and then have a second life.
The concept of the material passport, I think it was originally thought of as a way to try to ensure that in 30 or 50 years' time, when the buildings that are being erected now, there would be information about the materials they were erected from, which scientific information, and the methods of manufacture and stuff like that, which normally goes into an EPD, so that in 50 years' time, when that building is no longer required and dismantled or demolished, that the materials from it can be reused with certainty, because they'll come with a load of data about what they actually are, rather than these days there seems to be a demand from mainstream construction that reclaiming material from 50 or 100 years ago, that should come with material passports in order for it to be accepted. And certainly, if you look at the reclaimed steel work that's going on, their methodology is to take steel which is not that old, maybe 10 years or 20 years old, to analyse it, dismantle it carefully, analyse it, clean it up, repair it, do whatever, and then test it to the same standards as a piece of new steel. So when you buy a piece of reclaimed steel, it comes with a CEN or a CE certificate, which is as good as buying a new steel. So it means that the specifiers are freed from any liability issues because they're specifying stuff which is as good as a new alternative. And the people who do the refurbing, which is there's one company in Teesside, Cleveland Steels, they will guarantee or warranty the product that they're selling, presumably for the life of the building. I don't actually know what the warranty situation is there, but so the liability under it is covered, product liability, and that traditionally has been one of the pitfalls of reuse. Is that in the old days the building regs used to have a fitness for purpose clause.
Deemed to satisfy.
Deemed to satisfy, exactly. I don't know if it's still there. I think it probably is somewhere hidden deep.
I think some of the things like joist sizes, beam sizes probably still exist in that way.
I know. It probably does. I was thinking of bricks but deemed to satisfy. Was a blanket provision which allowed a building inspector to say, it's been up for 50 years. It's done the job. It looks okay. It's not deteriorated, so therefore it's going to manage to do whatever it is that is being asked of it now, and that was good enough. But the government has produced since Grenfell. The government has now got a new department, the Office for Product Safety and Security. OPSS, and they're going to come up with a new raft of regulations. And my fear is that they will legislate against reuse, even at that 2% which is being reused. We were contacted by them last year, had a long chat, said we'd like to be involved, and sort of outlined the extent. I mean, there are 150,000 tonnes of reclaimed materials sitting in stockholders' yards around the UK and Ireland, ready to be reused, and but without any CEN or CE certificates, on the basis that they look okay and they should do the job.
Yes.
If a salvage yard sells any of those materials to a private individual, then consumer protection law applies, and if a brick or a load of bricks fail as a result of that, in theory, the private individual who bought them and built DIY, some sort of thing in using the right kind of lime mortar or whatever, in the event of failure, they could go back to that salvage yard and say, right, I want the bricks replaced, or even the consequential cost of replacing those bricks reimbursed, and they will be covered under consumer protection law. I haven't heard it happen, but in theory that's what could happen. But if that same salvage yard sells the same bricks to the same customer's builder, and the same thing happens, then there is no liability on that consumer liability evaporates, and the liability for those bricks is taken by the builder, or if the client has said, go down to Bert's Salvage and buy those bricks, I like the look of them, then that will then be the client's responsibility. So they will no longer have consumer liability, as far as I know anyway.
So it's about fitness for purpose, isn't it? And material, what's the right way?
Well, it's those liability things. So, for example, with bricks, it seems to me quite fair. A brick has to go through a new brick goes through a freeze-thaw test cycle,
right,
in this country, and that test cycle might be to freeze them and then thaw them out 10 times or 50 times, and if they don't spoil, then they're considered sound,
right,
good enough to pass the test. A reclaimed brick that's say 100 years old has probably been through thousands of freeze-thaw cycles,
yes,
and so it's proven itself. And you could say, well, yeah, but that's all very well for 100 years, but what about 101 years? It might just fall apart. But if you look at St Albans Abbey, the very first abbey built in England,
right.
The bricks for that were Roman bricks, collected by the abbot, the then abbot.
Yeah.
What he did was he collected bricks from the Roman ruins of St Albans, of Roman St Albans, for his tenure, which was 10 years or 20 years, whatever it was. He started collecting bricks because he thought, well, I'll build a new cathedral out of these.
Yeah.
And this was in 900 or 1000 AD, or CE or whatever it's called now. And then the second abbot, he died, and then he hadn't built anything. The second abbot came in and built St Albans Abbey using reclaimed bricks. And that's still standing. So those reclaimed bricks in St Albans are 2,000 years old.
Quite dangerous.
Well, regenerative architecture was a word which first appeared in the 1970s.
Okay.
Invented by an American. And it didn't catch on then, but it's gradually built up, and different people have given it different meanings over the years.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got your regenerative. So Brian has kindly brought along a printout of his.
Yeah.
What's known as Jargon Buster.
Yeah.
The Green Building Encyclopedia Jargon Buster, and we've got it here.
So I've just gone in, and I took the easy way of finding. Initially, I just went to Wikipedia to see what they had to say. And they have two things, one which is regenerative agriculture and the other one is regenerative design, but they don't go to the detail of regenerative architecture. And then I went and did another search, and I found a series of articles. I think it's in LinkedIn. So there's a lady who's written quite a lot of detail, starting with what is regenerative architecture. And it starts with talking about sustainability as being an approach to being less bad, and then talking about sustainability as just sustaining the badness or the not goodness. And then goes on to talk about regenerative biology and then regenerative architecture and regenerative versus sustainable design. So there's quite a lot of thinking gone into this, and the need for regenerative design. And then it stopped. So published March the 5th, 2023, but then republished in LinkedIn in a series. And it goes into they both go into a lot of detail about circular economy, social movements, biophilic design, biomimicry. So it's sort of an embracing term, which just captures all of these other things.
So it's a bit like the word sustainable was being used 10 years ago.
Yeah. And I've always known that sustainable is a term that a lot of people don't know what it means. And I remember somebody saying environmental is about now and sustainable is about the future, which sort of kind of gives you a clue. But I've refused to accept the term sustainability and avoided it as much as I possibly can, because I prefer to talk about environmental. If you talk about sustainable, it's environmental compromised by money, by economics. And you always end up back to what you've always done in the past, business as usual. So I came up with a phrase to try and embrace what I think sustainability is about, and it's healthy, environmental, resourceful, appropriate, competent, and effective, and a yardstick, a kind of way of judging it, which spells out heresy. I'm a heretic. Because I don't do and I don't care for profits and money and stuff like that. I'm much more interested in the whole environmental issues and the appropriateness of the material, the choice of material and its properties for an application, not cheap mineral fibre, because cheap mineral fibre doesn't solve an awful lot of problems that a lot of other materials do.
Okay, where are we now? Can we just to sort of wrap this conversation up? Can we apply the word regenerative to reclaimed building materials? So in other words, can you have something called regenerative reclaimed building materials, and are they in any way different from other reclaimed building materials? In other words, is there a specific reclaimed building material which is regenerative and others which aren't?
Well, the only thing I just want to say that using reclaimed timber is a renewable material. It has the right properties. If you're reclaiming it and reusing it, it's not regenerative because you're not regenerating anything, you're just reusing. So I can't think of anything in particular that is regenerative in its makeup at all, apart from repairing the soil which you grow plant-based thermal insulation materials in, or cleaning up harbours that are full of dead life methane materials, and you know, that's about as far as I can get.
If you use reclaimed wood, if your use of reclaimed timber or reclaimed wood, I know it's a renewable resource, but if you're at the moment the forest, the planet is deforesting in total. There are countries which say they're reforesting, which is great if it's true, but on the whole, the planet is deforesting. And so if you reuse reclaimed timber, could you say that's regenerative because it means that
less wood is being chopped out of forests?
Yeah, if it were the case, unfortunately, it isn't the case that wood is being chopped down for the timber. Usually, the wood's being chopped down to create agricultural, land for growing for beef and for soya, not soya, palm oil, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But if it was the case that forests were being cut down for their timber, if it is reusing the wood, then regenerative reclaimed timber. Could you say that?
I've no idea.
And does that make any sense? Does it make any difference? Are there any other materials that could apply to? So, okay, all right, that's drifting away slightly from the reclaimed material options here. And whether you can have regenerative reclaimed building material, or whether only new material can be regenerative, or are we saying it's not even the material, it's the architecture, it's the building, somehow it's got to be the big picture that's regenerative, and actually the material is not regenerative at all. It's always going to be consuming energy and producing waste and doing all these sort of, but just less of it. It's just better for the environment, and it's not something that's regenerative has got to be ultimately a massive improvement to the environment. Not massive improvement, but it's got to be an improving situation rather than something which needs to be ameliorated, or is if you because one of the problems we've got is that we've got an increasing population in the planet. We're going to need more and more buildings. We're going to need more and more places for people to live. And so, unless the system is able to produce something which improves the planet in some way or another, deals with the planetary boundaries, increases, basically, in my book, it's got to increase the planet's capacity to absorb all the nasties that it uses. So to the point where it's within the planet's ability to absorb these things. Whereas with things like carbon, we've already exceeded the planet's ability to absorb it, which is why we've got global warming. And there are various other things like PFAS. We've exceeded the planet's ability to absorb PFAS, which is why it's now everywhere and causing major problems. So unless regenerative doesn't mean that, though, does it?
No.
I think it's a meaningless platitude. I mean, for my money, I would say, unless somebody could come along and say, write a seminal work, we need a work like Das Kapital by Karl Marx on regenerative architecture, which actually dots the I's, crosses the T's, and makes it at least an understandable concept, a real understandable concept.
Yeah.
And in fact, Das Kapital was wrong in so many different ways, and has proven to be not a sustainable is the wrong word, not a sensible way of organising society.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking that carbon sequestration is potentially heading in that direction of being able to kind of heal the planet.
Yeah, carbon sequestration, it means storing carbon, basically. Yeah. And the only effective way of storing carbon that I know of is not through carbon sinks in forests, rainforests.
No.
It's actually, because that's only temporary.
Yes.
Because the trees die and gives it back. But the only effective way is the acidification of the oceans, which then, by absorbing carbon dioxide, which makes them slightly acidic, carbonic acid. That extra acidity is then generates more shellfish, and the shellfish themselves they use the carbon to make calcium carbonate, and the calcium carbonate is then, at the end of their life, is for their bones and their shells, sinks to the bottom of the ocean and creates limestone.
Yeah.
And once it creates limestone, it's permanently stored. If you have some kind of inspirational thought about this, what I'll do is I'll do a Salvo News story about all this and put it out. We can put it out in Salvo News, our chat, and the synopsis of our chat, and a request for anybody who knows what they're talking about to tell us what regenerative architecture is and if and how it includes the reuse of reclaimed building material.
Yeah. Yes. It's challenging, isn't it?
It's annoying, actually, more than challenging. Well, I suppose that's what challenging means in the idiom, isn't it? Yeah. It's challenging means it's bloody annoying.
Yeah.
But yes, because you're just wasting your time sort of trying to sort out yet another problem that's been invented by somebody somewhere to deflect or distract us from the real main problem, which is to try and save the planet, not save the planet, because the planet's quite happy on its own.
Yeah.
Save humanity, I think you said.
Yes. Save the planet for human occupation. Human and nature occupation. Comfortable occupation, I should say.
Comfortable. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. And we'll have to sign off now.
Okay. Yeah. So amazing where you go when you start chatting.
Well, we did stick to the regenerative theme, or we tried to at least.
Yes.
But yes, we did ramble on a bit.
Yeah.
I'll get told off about this. But thank you very much for
my pleasure.
Joining in. Thanks a lot.